So this is the second session on Sunday morning. This is September 2nd. And I want to look at a few more suttas on the 5 spiritual faculties. Okay, so this is a sutta which speaks about the gradations, I call it the gradations in the faculties amongst different types of persons. So the text says that one who has completed and fulfilled the 5 faculties is an arahat. Then if they are weaker than that, one is on the path practicing for the fruit of arahatship. If still weaker, one is a non-returner, then going down one by one, practicing for the attainment of non-returning. If still weaker, a once-returner. Still weaker, one is practicing for the fruit of once returning. If still weaker, a stream enterer. If still weaker, one is practicing for the fruit of stream entry. So those are the 8 noble persons. And then the text says, I say that one in whom these 5 faculties are completely and totally absent is an outsider, one who stands amongst the worldlings. So it seems that this that the sutta is saying that the 5 faculties are found only in the noble disciples, that in others they're completely absent. But the first book of the Abhidhamma Pitaka, the Dhamma Sangani, gives a different perspective on this. Here I took the description, or part of the description, of the first wholesome state of consciousness in the Dhamma Sangani. This is called the sense sphere wholesome consciousness, accompanied by joy, by a joyful feeling, and associated with knowledge. So it says, on the occasion when that kind of citta has arisen, there are present the faculty of faith, the faculty of energy, the faculty of mindfulness, the faculty of concentration, the faculty of wisdom. And so this sense sphere wholesome citta can arise in anybody. It doesn't have to be only a noble person, one of the 8 noble persons. So even when we are engaged in ordinary wholesome activities, and it doesn't even have to be somebody engaged in Buddhist religious activities, but anybody, say, who's practicing, say, an act of generosity with some understanding of the value of practicing generosity, when they're doing that, then on that occasion, this would be a sense sphere wholesome citta, accompanied by joy, if they're enjoying the act of giving, and associated with knowledge, if they're understanding what they're doing. So we say on that occasion, for that person, there's present faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And then, okay, and this would be the case in the sense sphere wholesome cittas that are accompanied or associated with knowledge. And if a sense sphere wholesome citta has arisen, not associated with knowledge, what faculties would be present? Would any of these faculties be present? A test. Dissociated from knowledge. Who thinks no faculties would be present? Raise the hands high. Who thinks some faculties will be present? Okay, anybody want to explain which faculties will be present? You want to try? Okay. Okay, let him try.
Without knowledge, I suppose if you were still like doing something for someone, like there would still be the energy, the faculty of energy within it, and then perhaps mindfulness, depending on how focused on the task at hand they are.
Does anybody know which faculties are present? Okay, let Sam try.
It would be energy, mindfulness, and concentration, because the faith in the giving wouldn't be present because you're not treating the dana or whatever as anything spiritual or like that. And then the wisdom wouldn't be there because you're not seeing the value of the wholesome deed.
I think we're pretty close, except faith would be present.
Oh.
Yeah, you said faith wouldn't be present, but it would be present because there's still some kind of, I don't know, some kind of, maybe it's not a faith that's accompanied by knowledge, but some kind of like out of a devotion, a sense of trust, a sense of inspiration by some kind of spiritual values. One is practicing generosity, though one doesn't have an understanding of the significance of what one is doing.
Would that be blind faith?
On that occasion, it would be, you would say there's blind faith, but that it's not accompanied by knowledge.
Right.
But it doesn't mean blind faith in the negative sense that you're believing something just at random, without any. It could be on other occasions one has a rational understanding of it, but here one is just doing it spontaneously. Okay, moving on. This is an interesting sutta. Here the Buddha is speaking to the Venerable Sariputta, and Venerable Sariputta was the Buddha's chief disciple and the one who is foremost in panya, in wisdom. So he asked Sariputta, do you have faith that the faculty of faith, when developed and cultivated, has the deathless, that's nibbana, as its ground, its destination, its final goal? That the faculty of energy, mindfulness, concentration, wisdom has the deathless as its final goal. Okay, then Sariputta, he doesn't quite answer directly. He doesn't say whether I have faith or don't have faith, but he says, I do not go by faith in the Blessed One about this. That is, he doesn't have to rely on faith in the Blessed One about this. Because he says, those by whom this has not been known, seen, understood, realized, and fathomed with wisdom, they would have to go by faith in others about this. But those by whom this has been known, seen, understood, realized, and fathomed with wisdom, they would be free from any kind of doubt about this. And so then Sariputta says, I am one who has known and seen this with wisdom, so I'm without any kind of doubt that these faculties, when developed and cultivated, have the deathless as their final goal. Okay, then in this sutta, the Buddha, Sariputta explains the process by which the 5 faculties unfold. You see, there's a kind of sequence in the unfolding of the 5 faculties. Okay, so one begins when the noble disciple has faith. This is faith or trust in the Buddha as the teacher, and faith or confidence in the path taught by the Buddha. And so it's said that it's to be expected that the noble disciple, when he has faith, he'll dwell with energy aroused for the abandoning of unwholesome states and the acquisition of wholesome states. So faith serves as, you could say, the basis for the arising of the faculty of energy by which one makes the effort to cultivate the practice. So faith is not sufficient. It's not, faith itself is not the guarantee of liberation, but one has to walk the actual path, but the path starts with faith. So one has trust that the Buddha is the fully enlightened one, trust that the Dharma is well proclaimed, trust that the Sangha is practicing the good path, and then based on that faith, one takes up the practice of energy, or one applies energy to purifying the mind. Okay, then the next step, when the noble disciple has faith and has aroused energy, then it's to be expected that the disciple will be mindful. Here the explanation is a little strange to me. Will be mindful, possessing supreme mindfulness and discretion and so forth. And that mindfulness of his is his faculty of mindfulness. It would seem to me, this is my understanding, that when one has faith and then the energy is aroused, what one does is to undertake the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So one cultivates the 4 foundations of mindfulness: contemplation of the body, feelings, states of mind, and dharmas. Okay, then when there's faith, energy, and mindfulness is established, then it's to be expected that one will gain samadhi, concentration, that one-pointedness of mind that takes release as its aim, its objective. And that concentration, that is the faculty of concentration. Okay, then the 5th step, and again this is a little strange explanation of wisdom, is to be expected that a noble disciple who has faith, who is energetic, mindful, and concentrated, will understand the samsara is without a discoverable beginning. No first point is to be found of beings wandering on, hindered by ignorance, fettered by craving. But with the fading away, remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance, there comes the peaceful state, the sublime state, that is nibbana. So that's said to be the faculty of wisdom. But it seems to me that, again, this is a bit strange explanation, because what I would expect would be that when one has the faculty of concentration, then one applies it to understanding this is suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path. But maybe this is just an alternative way of stating the 4 Noble Truths. So samsara without beginning is the truth of suffering. Its cause or root is ignorance and craving. Then the fading away of ignorance, you could say, is the 3rd Noble Truth. And then the practice being undertaken to achieve that is the 4th Noble Truth. Okay, then the sutta sort of wraps up with Sariputta saying, when he has again and again strived in such a way, that is the faculty of energy, when he is recollected in such a way, that's the faculty of mindfulness, concentrated the mind in such a way, the faculty of concentration, and understood things in such a way, that's pujanati, so that's the faculty of panya, then the noble disciple gains complete faith thus. It seems, again, a little strange that faith is brought in here. As to those things that previously I had only heard about, now I dwell, having contacted them with the body, or sort of realized them personally, and having pierced them with wisdom, I now see them. And then it said that that faith of his is his faculty of faith. I don't quite understand this. It seems that faith is something that comes at the beginning, and that when one sees these things with wisdom, then, in a sense, faith has lost its function. Its function has been completed and surpassed. But anyway, this is what the text says. Okay, then there's one more sutta on the 5 faculties, 5 spiritual faculties. Okay, here the Buddha is speaking, and he asks the monks, is there a method by means of which a monk who is a trainee, and the word is used, seka, standing on the plane of a trainee might know, I am a trainee, while a monk who is an arhat standing on the plane of one beyond training might understand, I am an arhat. One beyond training is the arhat. Okay, now a seka, technically the trainee, is one, who is either stream enterer, once returning, once returner, or non-returner. So even though we might consider ourselves, we are practitioners of the Dhamma, but technically we don't use the word seka until one has reached the stage of stream entry. Then one becomes one sort of fixed in destiny, and one acquires the training, sort of the training becomes an inherent part of one's being. Okay, so now Sariputta says, or actually, I'm sorry, the monks say, our teachings are rooted in the Blessed One. In other words, they want the Buddha himself to answer. And so the Buddha says that there is such a method, and then he explains the method, or several methods. Okay, so one method is that the way a monk who's a trainee understands, I am a trainee. Here the monk who is a trainee understands as it really is the Four Noble Truths. So the trainee from stream enterer on has had this direct experiential realization of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, then the second method, say this is method number 1. And method number 2, the one who's a trainee reflects, is there outside here, that means outside the Buddha Dharma, another ascetic or Brahmin who teaches a Dhamma that's so real, true, and actual as the Buddha does, the Blessed One. And then he understands there is no other ascetic or Brahmin outside here who presents a teaching which is so real, true, and genuine as the Buddha does. So that's the kind of confidence of the trainee. But now we come to the third one, which involves the 5 spiritual faculties. Okay, so the monk who's the trainee understands the 5 spiritual faculties, so faith through wisdom. Now this is the important point. He does not yet dwell, having contacted with the body, their destination, their culmination, their fruit, their final goal, but having pierced it through with wisdom, he sees it. So he has not yet actually fully reached, fully realized, fully embodied the final goal, that fruit, the final fruit. But he's able to see, he's pierced it with wisdom. He's seen the goal, but not yet reached it. So this would be like the way the stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, when they enter the special meditative attainment, they can see Nibbana, and even they experience Nibbana, but they haven't yet eradicated all of the defilements. They're like still some clouds that are separating them from the final goal. It's a little bit like on a night when there are clouds, cloudy night, light clouds. For the worldling, it's like a night when dense clouds, so you don't see the moon at all. But for stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, there are different like light layers of clouds, so you could still see the moon, but not with perfect clarity. Okay, so then comes the contrast. So what is the method by means of which one who is an arahat, standing on the plane of one beyond training, the plane of the arahat, can understand, I am an arahat. This is not done boastfully, I am an arahat, but just he can confirm his own attainment. So here it says, the monk who is beyond training understands the 5 spiritual faculties, faith through wisdom, and he dwells having contacted with the body, their destination, their culmination, their fruit, their final goal, and having pierced it through with wisdom, he sees it. So the arahat has actually experientially embodied the final goal. And so that's the method by which he confirms that I am one beyond training. Okay, maybe I'll ask now whether we have some questions relating to the faculties. So please feel welcome to ask. I see there's a written question here. Let me take this first. Could you speak about the chronology of authorship of the suttas, Visuddhimagga, Abhidhamma? Okay, I mean, of course, that's a big topic. Well, let us say that the sutta, at least the main Nikayas in the Sutta Pitaka, like I would say Samyutta Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, the Digha Nikaya, at least most of the suttas, we could say come from the stratum that we call early Buddhism or archaic Buddhism, which probably preserves the teachings, the Buddha's actual verbal teachings most reliably, the most reliable sources for the Buddha's verbal teachings. So that's the stratum of early Buddhism or archaic Buddhism. And those suttas are not distinctly Theravada Buddhist texts in the sense that they're a unique preserve of the Theravada Buddhist school, but there was like a collection of the suttas, pretty much probably the same, that as the schools arose, the different early Buddhist schools in different geographical regions, they would have inherited basically the same body of texts, but in the course of development, some differences in arrangement and differences in formulation appeared. But we could find, for the Pali suttas, we could find parallels or counterparts, say in the Chinese Tripitaka, in what's called the Agama Sutras, and also versions preserved in Tibetan translation, versions in Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit have been discovered, versions that came from the northwest, Gandhara, that was a region that corresponds now to Afghanistan. So there are counterparts to the Pali Suttas, which shows that this was a common stratum of the early Buddhist schools. Then the Abhidhamma developed. Each, it seems, of the major schools had its own Abhidharma. So the Abhidharma Pitaka in Pali is distinctive of the Theravada Buddhist school. The major school in northern India called the Savastivada also had its Abhidharma Pitaka, which it's quite different from the Theravada Abhidharma Pitaka. Certain similarities which show that there was an early core of the Abhidhamma, but in the schools, the different schools, that common core got elaborated very, very differently. So we have at least two major Abhidhamma systems, the Savastivada and the Theravada. And then the Visuddhimagga in this chronology comes last. Let's say the Abhidhamma Pitaka, if we're going to give dates to it. According to the traditional account, the Tripitaka was set by about the time of King Ashoka, so that would be 3rd century BC. I'm not really sure that the Abhidhamma texts were finalized at that time, but by the time the Buddhism came to Sri Lanka, 1st century, or actually, Buddhism came to Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BC, but by the time the texts were written down, 1st century BC, maybe by that time the Abhidhamma had reached its final form. Okay, so that's 1st century BC. Then there came the development of commentaries on the suttas and on the Abhidhamma, and those commentaries came to be the basis for the Visuddhimagga, which was composed by the Indian monk Buddhaghosa in the 5th century BC. So that is the chronology. Okay, I think, Sam, did you have a question? And take the microphone. Wait, Sam has a question.
Bhante, in the 5 spiritual faculties, if faith is stronger than wisdom, it becomes blind faith, but if wisdom is stronger than faith, it becomes intellectualized.
Okay, this is an interesting point.
And if energy...
Let me just comment on that.
What's that?
Can I just comment on
Sure.
that first? Or maybe you go ahead and finish your
Well,
question.
the second part is the energy and concentration, if they're out of balance also.
Yeah.
And this is in relation to bhavana.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know the rest of it then.
Okay. Yeah, what he's referring to is an idea, a kind of theme that comes up in sort of meditative practice, that it's necessary to balance the faculties with each other. And the faculties are put into 2 pairs which can get out of whack, out of balance. So one pair is faith and wisdom. But first let me say, before I explain, that I haven't found that in the suttas themselves, and I haven't, maybe it does come in the Visuddhimagga, I'd have to look into that, but it's not canonical. But the theme is that one should balance faith and wisdom, because if faith is too strong and wisdom is too weak, then one just is vulnerable to blind faith, or one just becomes like a devotee. So one's whole practice is just devotional practice, doing what they call pujas, making offerings, reciting verses, and bowing to the Buddha. But there's no effort to understand the principles of the Dhamma. Okay, so that's one extreme faith without wisdom. Then it's said, this is where I have some doubt, wisdom without faith. Well, I wouldn't call that wisdom, but maybe we call it intellectuality without faith. So this is, if you just take an intellectual approach to the Dhamma without faith, then there's no motivation for practice. So you learn the Abhidhamma, then you can say, okay, so there are 89 chittas, I know them, do you know them? There's 52 mental factors, do you know them? Can you explain the 28 rupas, how the rupas and chittas interact? So you could do all of that, very clever. And then you go into contests and debates with others, and you become like very learned, but because faith is minimal, so you're not motivated to practice. So in that way, it said faith and wisdom have to be balanced, so that you have the faith that motivates practice to develop wisdom. And you have wisdom that can guide faith, so it doesn't become just emotional effusion and blind belief. So that's one pair of faculties. The other pair is virya, energy, and samadhi, concentration. So it said that if energy is excessive, not balanced by sufficient concentration, then one practices with a lot of vigor and diligence, but the mind becomes agitated, not calm. Yeah, and then I'm just trying to think if there's an example of this. Yeah, there's an example that's mentioned in the suttas about a newly ordained monk named Sona, who had practiced very, very diligently, very vigorously, but he couldn't achieve anything. And so, even to the point, practicing, that he was just completely wearing out his body. So then he reflected and he thought, it's useless for me to continue as a monk. I've practiced so diligently, nothing to show for it. So it's possible my obstacles are just too strong, so I might as well give up the monk's life and go back and enjoy sense pleasures and do meritorious deeds. So in my next life, I can achieve something. Or maybe in the time of the next Buddha, I can achieve something. So then he went to the Buddha and said, Bhante, it's too tough, I want to give it up. And then the Buddha said to Sona, in the past, weren't you a musician? So he was a musician who played the lute. And then he said, yes, I used to play the lute. And then the Buddha said, what happens when you tune up the strings to the lute and you make them very, very tight? Can you get music? No, then I just get a chaos of sounds. And what happens when you tune the strings of the lute too loose and then you play it? What kind of music do you get? I don't get any music, I just get duh, 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 duh. And then the Buddha said, if you want to get music out of the lute, what do? And so Sona said, I tune the strings so they're not too tight, not too loose. Then I can get beautiful music. And the Buddha said, it's in the same way with the practice. You can't practice too vigorously without sufficient calm. And what happens if you have too much calm without vigor, you're not getting real concentration, but you are drooping, 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 and you go into the deep sleep samadhi, not the real samadhi. And so you have to balance energy with concentration. So those are 4 of the faculties forming 2 pairs. And then what about mindfulness? It said that mindfulness is useful in all cases, because mindfulness is sort of what oversees the faculties and ensures that they're in proper balance. Yeah, so that is the balancing of the faculties.
And then just the one phrase from the sutta you just read, having contacted with their body through their destination, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's translated very literally. So I don't think it actually means that one physically contacts with the body, but I take it to mean that one experiences in a very intimate, personal way, through personal experiential realization. So it's almost as though the experience is so vivid and so intense, as if one is actually one is in a sense experiencing it with the body.
And through their destination would be through realization or
Yeah.
through to their
Yeah.
final knowledge.
What does that mean?
Yeah, through their destination would be through to final knowledge or realization.
Yeah, the fruit would be
Okay.
the attainment of Nibbana in this life. Okay, Suki has a question.
Actually, I had the same question about the same, the phrase.
Yeah.
But here, it looks to me the trainee and Arhan, they both have a material as a object of a practice.
They
And,
both have a what? Material?
Material, a body
Yeah,
as the object of practice to go beyond. I mean, it seems to me here's like contacted with the body.
yeah.
They both have they practice with the body.
No, as I said, I take that to be a kind of manner of expression to show that the experience that it's a personal experience which is very intense, even as if one is experiencing it physically. But it's not that they're necessarily practicing, say, contemplation of the body.
Oh, and then their destination, here it's not his destination, it's not his culmination, it's their destination, their culmination. So is it?
Yeah, it means the culmination of the 5 spiritual faculties. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Let me just look at that again. Okay, he does not yet dwell having contacted with the body, their destination, their culmination. That means the destination of the 5 spiritual faculties, since the 5 spiritual faculties are directed towards the attainment of Nibbana.
Thank you.
Bhante, I have read part of this earlier too. I understand your explanation. For me, I have a little bit of problem with the last 2. The 6 senses, I can understand. I think generally average layman can understand,
Yeah.
The eyes and
Yeah.
nose and hearing, whatever. Masculinity, femininity, and the life force,
Yeah.
it's also almost, it's a natural
Yeah.
thing we know.
Yeah.
Even the spiritual faculties,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you can see it, Saddha,
Yeah. Okay.
all the, but the last 3, I have, wanting to know, I can understand that's a natural thing as well.
Yeah.
We always are inquiring, but when it comes to enlightenment, it is more difficult. And the last one,
Yeah.
because I'm not anywhere close to that, I
Yeah.
suppose that's the reason.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us are not anywhere close to it, I believe. So, why they were considering those 2 also as
Why what?
why the last 2 were considered as spiritual, as faculties?
As faculties.
Yeah. Because others are common. I mean, to me, I can't dispute that. Rest is,
Yeah.
I have to accept it.
I mean, of course, it's natural that it's difficult to understand unless one has actually experienced them.
Yeah.
But just the important thing is to know the meaning of those terms.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what's called the faculty of final knowledge, that would be the wisdom faculty of one who is on the path to arhatship, who's already completed the stage of stream entry and is now continuing to cultivate in order to reach arhatship.
No, I know,
Yeah,
but
and then the faculty.
I find as a layman, I can't.
Yeah, so that's the faculty of final knowledge.
Yeah.
Then the faculty of one who has final knowledge, that is the wisdom of the arhat who's completed the task of
So we
contemplation.
consider them also as faculties.
Excuse me?
Those 2 also considered.
Yeah, they're faculties because they play the dominant role in progressing towards the realization of the goal.
Nibbana.
And then once that goal is reached, I guess there's still in some way a faculty. I don't know. I don't know how myself.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
The rest, actually, I really enjoyed the other 20.
Yeah. Okay.
It's wonderful.
Oh, but then I have the question.
Okay.
Bhante, once a person has attained the stream entry level, how does he proceed from a stream enterer to the next step, the once returner?
Yeah.
What is he supposed to do in order to reach the next?
The next stage?
Yeah.
Then it's a matter of going back and just cultivating again. You could say cultivating the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, particularly the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Or from another angle, we could say it's again cultivating the 5 spiritual faculties. Already the faculty of faith is now secure because the stream enterer has this unshakable confidence. And so to complete the development of the path, the stream enterer has to arouse energy, and then with energy practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness, then gaining concentration, and then based on concentration to develop insight, the faculty of wisdom.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I saw somebody. Okay, Punika over here.
Good morning. As a
I think you lost the.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? As a lay follower. Hello? Hello?
Hello. Yeah. Hello. Hello.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, she
I
has
have
one.
it. Thank you. As a lay follower of the Buddha's teachings, how can I incorporate the 5 spiritual faculties in just everyday life? Not really,
Yeah.
I guess, informal meditation or,
Yeah.
during the day,
Yeah.
interacting with people, friends. How can I
That's
consciously incorporate that? Any suggestions?
It seems to me that the spiritual faculties as such are not intended as sort of guidelines for conducting one's everyday affairs and interacting with friends and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But those are sort of, you can see from the way they're defined, that they are like defining a path of practice for the attainment of realization.
Mm.
There are many other guidelines in the Buddha's teaching for conducting one's everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that the 5 faculties include everything. So there are many guidelines in the Buddha's teaching.
Mm.
But actually, we could actually take sort of the principles of the 5 spiritual faculties, and sort of apply them to everyday life, at least to some extent.
Mm. I think mindfulness
Yeah,
is one.
especially,
Yeah.
being sort of, the starting point is still faith in the 3 jewels,
Mhm.
Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And then whenever one undertakes some wholesome activity, one does it with energy. And then one
Okay.
goes about one's day-to-day activities with mindfulness. And then even though one is not gaining that sort of deep samadhi, but one should sort of set apart some periods of the day for intentional meditation practice,
Mhm.
in which one is at least honing the skills that will eventually lead to samadhi. And then with wisdom, even though one is not gaining experiential wisdom, but if one devotes period to study the Buddha's teaching, then one is gaining the wisdom that comes from learning, and then one reflects on the teaching, you get the wisdom that comes from reflection, and then through one's meditation practice, especially if one does like a long-term retreat, then one builds up the strength of samadhi that will lead to the arising of the wisdom of insight.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Hi. Real quick question.
Yeah, your name
and
again was? Your name again?
Oh, I'm Gary.
Gary.
Yep. Mine is probably just a silly question, but you mentioned the non-returner.
Yeah.
Is that someone who, upon achieving enlightenment or something, chooses to die or something? Am I misunderstanding
Okay.
the non-returning?
Yeah, I'm not explaining these terms because we had already sort of explained them in early Abhidhamma retreats. Okay, let's just take it very concisely. So there are 4 stages along the way to liberation. So the first is called the stream enterer. The stream enterer is one who has experientially seen the truth of the Dhamma. And by seeing the truth of the Dhamma, this person has metaphorically entered the stream of the Dhamma. So the Dhamma here is considered like the stream of a river which carries a floating object to the ocean. And so once one enters the stream of the Dhamma, then that stream of the Noble Eightfold Path is going to carry one to Nibbana. And so the stream enterer is a person who has seen the truth of the Dhamma, who has cut off certain fetters or defilements that keep one in bondage, and thereby is heading for liberation in a maximum of 7 more lifetimes. If they have sharp faculties, they could complete the practice in fewer lifetimes, but the one with the most sluggish faculties will take 7 more lives. So that's the stream enterer. Now, if the person goes further in their practice and makes the next breakthrough of realization, they become a once-returner. So the once-returner weakens the defilements to the extent that they will come back to this world at most 1 more time and then achieve final liberation from this world. Okay, then suppose the person goes further in their practice and makes the 3rd breakthrough, then they become a non-returner. The non-returner cuts off still another layer of the fetters, and then becomes, and by cutting off those fetters, the non-returner doesn't take rebirth back into this world in which we live, the human realm or the lower heavenly realms, but they take rebirth in a set of realms even above the sensuous heavenly realms. We can call them the divine realms. And then they achieve liberation from within the divine realms. Okay, and then suppose the person continues with their practice, and all of their faculties come to maturity, then they reach the 4th breakthrough, which is the stage of arhatship. And at that stage, they cut off all the remaining defilements. And then as an arahat, they don't take rebirth anywhere, but they attain the ultimate Nibbana realization, or they attain the ultimate Nibbana state.
Thank you.
Okay, I see in the back. Yep.
Bhante, earlier you mentioned that there were 8 types of some noble folks who were working with the 5 spiritual faculties. Could you mention, is it 4 in addition to the one you just listed?
Yeah, now I mentioned the 4 stages of those who make the breakthroughs, but there is a stage when the practice reaches a certain degree of maturity where one is said to have entered on the path leading to the attainment of that fruit. So one is said in that stage to be one who is practicing for the realization or the attainment of the corresponding fruit.
So it's one who has practiced and one who has achieved. So practicing
One
for
who
stream
is
entry.
practicing for the attainment of the fruit,
Okay.
and the one who has attained the fruit. And now, I don't know whether I should mention this, but there's some difference between the sutta perspective on the 8 noble persons and the Abhidhamma commentarial point of view. Okay, from the sutta, this becomes a big topic. It seems from the sutta point of view, when one enters the path and is practicing for the realization of the fruit, you can be on the path for an extended period of time. So say one enters the path for the attainment of the fruit of stream entry. So one could be on the path for maybe hours, days, weeks. But what is said in the sutta, that person cannot pass away without realizing the fruit of stream entry. So this seems to be, well, this is what I would call an extended version of the path. Okay, from the Abhidhamma point of view, the path and fruit are moments of consciousness. And so when one attains the path is just one moment of consciousness, one citta that has the function of cutting off defilements. And then the path is followed immediately by a few more moments of consciousness that are called the fruit, the fruition cittas. And with the fruition cittas, one realizes the bliss of liberation that comes from cutting off those defilements. And so one has these 2 sort of ways of looking at the relationship between path and fruit. In the sutta perspective, we have an extended period of the path, but the only thing that's guaranteed is that once you enter the path, before you pass away, you'll realize the fruit. And then it seems in the sutta perspective, the fruit is not a special state of consciousness, but just the attainment of that stage itself, becoming a stream enterer, becoming a once returner, becoming a non-returner, being an arahat. But from the Abhidhamma perspective, the path is that particular citta called the path consciousness that lasts just for one snap of a second and cuts off the defilements, followed by a few more cittas that enjoy the bliss of liberation, and those are called the fruit. Many years ago in Sri Lanka, there came a famous Burmese meditation master named BAUS Chuang to Sri Lanka, and he teaches very much on the basis of the Visuddhimagga and the Abhidhamma and the commentaries. And then I met him together with some other Western monks, and I tried to present that problem to him. How does one reconcile the sutta point of view with the Abhidhamma point of view? But what was interesting, I couldn't get him to understand or to see a difference between them. Because as it's coming from the Burmese background, in which they emphasize so much the Abhidhamma and the commentaries, that it sort of forms the lens of interpretation through which one looks at the suttas. And so couldn't get him to see that there's a difference between the 2 points of view. So maybe I'm wrong in seeing, in seeing a difference in points of view, but the wording certainly is indicative. Excuse me?
You told me in the beginning, if I wanted to learn Dhamma, study Abhidhamma, wouldn't that be the same? It's inseparable in some ways?
I told you if you want to learn Dhamma that you should study the Abhidhamma.
Yeah, many years ago.
I don't think I said that. I said, what I might have said is that if you want to get a sort of very fine analytical lens through which to look at the suttas, then it's useful to learn the Abhidhamma.
Yeah. So it's kind of inseparable, is it
That's
not?
somewhat different from saying that if you want to learn the Dhamma, study Abhidhamma.
Well, I mean to get like a really profound or a deeper understanding of it, for sure.
Yeah, I would have said that, yeah. Okay. But then I would have... If you had started to diligently study the Abhidhamma, then I would say, be a little careful that you're going to run into some different points of view between Sutta and Abhidhamma. Okay, we can take maybe one more question, then we'll have to go for the lunch. Okay, we'll take here. Paul, is that this? Right here, right here. Okay.
Hundreds of millions of people in the world have the faculty of faith.
Yeah.
And through faith in chanting the Buddha's name, or the faith as an example in Kuan Yin, miracles are happening constantly.
Yeah.
Is this due to the collective mind or the individual mind, the faculty of mind?
How those miracles happen?
Yes. Is it a collective, is it the faculty of the collective mind of millions of people that are trusting in the Buddha and just chanting the Buddha's name and are achieving miracles every moment in the world?
Every moment? I don't know whether they're occurring every moment.
Well, if there are hundreds of millions of people are chanting Namo Amitofo or chanting Namo Kwansa Ing Pusa, and they're, I mean, I've experienced like tremendous power from chanting Namo Amitofo or chanting Kuan Yin's
How
mantra.
that works, I don't really know the explanation. I know that when people with faith and devotion towards any sort of spiritual ideal, somehow it brings what events that we would consider miraculous that can't be explained in rational, naturalistic way. How that occurs, I don't have an explanation.
Faculty of mind is king, mind-only school.
But whether it's
Perhaps.
occurring entirely through the individual's mind, I would say that there's some kind of spiritual force field around humankind, or around the world. And when you have this strong, pure faith, you tap into that force field and it brings a kind of power
Absolutely.
down. But it, you know, say a Catholic does it, they'll say, this is the miracle that's coming through the grace of God, or the intercession of the Virgin Mary, or the power of Jesus. If a Muslim does it, he'll say that's the wonder of Allah. If a Hindu does it, he'll say it's the miracle of Shiva, or coming through Shiva, Rama, Krishna, whatever. And for the Buddhists, we have our own explanations. But it seems that there's that common force field, and with devotion and pure faith and goodness of heart, one could tap into that. Okay, I think we'll have to break for the lunch and then come back. I think it's... Okay.
Say bow to the Buddha. Bow to Bande.